South Park Fractured But Whole. First time we've had a butthole on the cover of a Game Informer.
Finally.
Wait, is that a pun?
Yep, correct.
Oh.
Reeves, you wrote this cover story. We're all at the studio. This is Ubisoft San Francisco, known for
Rocksmith, of all things. Which I didn't even know until we started doing research for the story. It was like, wait, what have these guys even done? Oh, not a lot, because the office was like just a marketing office for like 20 years, and then they finally started doing Rocksmith games.
To be fair, Rocksmith is really, really well done for what it
great.
is.
It's a good game.
Yeah.
I don't mean to diminish the quality of that game, but it's just like...
But you go from Obsidian, an RPG studio that made the last one, to a team that's done music games.
Yeah, it just seems like a weird choice. But then when we went and visited the studio, you find out that they've hired up a lot, and like most of the team wasn't there for Rocksmith. They've actually been hired on because they came from other companies, other places. One guy worked on like BioShock. They had an animator from the actual South Park animation team.
Couple animators they hired over from Obsidian.
Right.
Narrative lead from Telltale. They have an interesting team that they've assembled. And it reminds me a little bit of like the Horizon Zero Dawn cover story trip, just in terms of a studio creating their first RPG. And it's like, well, a lot of people in the studio like RPGs. I think we could probably pull that off. Like the senior producer, Jason Schroeder.
Right.
He was playing the new Star Ocean, which is like, that is the mark of an RPG fan when you're going to Star Ocean 8. Like, I know it had terrible reviews, but let's rock it. So there's the pedigree for making the new South Park game.
Playing Star Ocean.
That's right.
He knows what a bad RPG looks like.
And now they're trying to make a good one. What did you guys think? What did we see? Give us the whole rundown.
I liked what I saw. Kyle, I think we all walked away pretty excited. Like, if nothing else, this game is going to be funny. Because, Matt and Trey, who South Park creators, like, they're behind every like word in this game. Well, I mean, not every word, I shouldn't say that, but like they're behind the main script of the game.
Right.
And what we saw was pretty funny.
Yeah, I mean, we saw cutscenes, we saw gameplay, we saw a lot of stuff, and it was like those Trey and Matt, like, they're totally in, and their humor is applied here, and it's funny. Like, we were laughing just them showing us demos and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What was the funnianest thing you saw?
That's
Do
like
we want to reveal that?
I mean, I'm sure we talked about it in the cover story.
There was a fart joke.
There were a number of fart jokes.
Some kids saying bad words.
I did. It's a joke that we ended up seeing a couple times over the course of many presentations, but we saw Drunk Randy, like,
which is a big theme early on in the game.
And maybe it's just because we saw it a lot while we were there that it's sticking out for me, but just they were like, he like busted into this room to start a fight, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, he's a red wine drunk. That's the worst kind of drunk. And he's just like rampaging around, just like trying to start fights with everybody.
And there's a good Trey Parker line where he's just insisting on you giving him his keys back so he can drive.
Do the voice.
And it's always just close up, and he goes, give me my keys. It's just like good exasperated Randy voice, and it made us laugh like idiots every single time that we saw that, which was a lot.
Yeah.
I wish I could remember specifics, but we saw an argument between the new kid who you play in this game and the last game, between his parents. And it was just them arguing, but also trying to be like lighthearted and be nice towards the kid. And there was something in that dynamic that really made me laugh. Also, you can change your heritage in this game, which is a whole system to like adjust the difficulty.
Right.
And so apparently, in this example that we saw, they had changed it so that they were Native American. And so the parents of the new kid just like pop their head in the bedroom, and they just have this one quick line where it's like, by the way, we're very proud of our Native American ancestry. I know we've never talked about it before. And then just like slam your bedroom doors.
Also, Professor Chaos, one of his like evil plans is like covering the sort of city in lava, and by lava it's like red Legos. He's just covering the world in red Legos, and they showed us a sequence where one of the kids is like trapped behind red Legos.
Really good too. It was like Craig, I think.
Yeah, and he's like, guys, I'm not gonna make it, and they're like, come on, Craig, you've got to come over here, and he's just like standing by a pile of red Legos.
It's
like,
just played super earnest.
Yeah,
like they're kids playing a game,
which is what that's like real. A main focus of theirs is like that idea of those kids. For them, everything is real, but we get to take a step back and see that it's all absurd and imaginary, which is always one of my favorite things about South Park.
Yeah, like I didn't go on the trip because I apparently don't get invited to be a part of anything.
What is
but
it's a new character he's working on.
Yeah, Reiner Downer. But they are so damn smart, Trey and Matt. Like the first game focused on video games and recreating like a fantasy RPG. Mm-hmm. Now they're going into the big Marvel kind of DC movies. This big thing that's going on now. Every one of those movies,
all comic book movies,
is gargantuan, and they're just right on that, and it's perfect for the gaming verse to absorb that. But they're characters that I've seen. I don't want to reveal Timmy's
There's been plenty out
character,
there.
but God, that slayed me. Like, I thought that was hilarious.
He's just Professor X. I think we've talked about
Yeah.
it before. Yeah.
But I don't want to reveal what they do with it. There's
Sure.
something really
Okay.
clever there that I want everyone to experience on their own. But they nailed it. Like, all those characters, like their alternate identities as heroes are hilarious and just a perfect play on what's out there
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
Even just the setup for the game is amusing to me because you start out, you're basically still playing the Lord of the Rings style RPG, and then Cartman's like, well, I'm not. This game isn't cool enough for me, and I want to be like in charge again. So he's
And he needs to like bring you down a peg because
Yeah.
New Kid has like he is the Lord, he's the king, he's King Douchebag by the end of Stick of Truth.
It's
It's
kind
just
of
like time to reset this DM.
kind of a
session
clever
here.
way to reset everything too.
Right.
So you have to like earn new powers and whatnot. But he's like latches onto this missing cat named Scrambles, and he's like,
right.
"This cat Scrambles is gone, and I
This
need to go
town's
find
gone
this
to
cat."
hell.
Yeah, nailed that Cartman there. But and so he's just like obsessed with this, like finding this cat Scrambles, and they're like going into like crack dens and stuff, and like all this other terrible things is happening. But they're all only worried about getting Scrambles back. So
Yeah, so it's that fun level of South Park humor where like the town is dealing with adult issues and the town is actually going to hell, but the kids are just focused on the game.
right.
And then throughout the course of the game, of course, like it builds up to, oh, there's a larger issue here. Like in Stick of Truth, it's Nazi zombies. We don't know exactly what the bigger themes are here. Like Professor Chaos is a villain, but that's only in the earlier parts of the game.
Yeah.
Eventually that's going to fade away.
There's definitely like a shadow behind him somewhere, like moving things. Like
Right.
a mysterious figure doing something else.
How much did you guys see? Like, in terms of length? Like,
A fair amount. It was an interesting trip. It wasn't like a sit down, here's the demo of the game. It was scattered, and so we went like across a bunch of different disciplines. So it's like when we're seeing the example of like, hey, here's the how the audio team is putting the farts together and working with the composer from South Park on the music. Then we see like snippets of, oh, here's a battle against a bunch of Orthodox Jewish folks, or it's like we're at another demo. It's like, hey, we're showing off animation. You see like another snippet here. So it's a little bit scattered.
Yeah, we got a weird amount of like story info from our like audio meeting, like our meeting with the like audio team, because of, like our lore meeting wasn't scheduled until the second day. So it's just like the way info kind of rolled
Gotcha.
out to us was a little like stilted. But like in the end, I think we saw a pretty healthy amount for the game. Like,
Yeah.
I would say maybe
A good scatter shot.
above average almost for a cover story.
my big concern with this kind of sequel, if you will, is absorbing a world in TV and movies is very different than in games, where you could watch like 15 seasons of the show or 20 seasons of the show and still feel a nice connection to South Park. Whereas in games, when you retread those same steps, it starts to feel very samey, and it's the
Right.
same city, right, from the first game.
Yeah.
In the time you guys played, did you get a sense of like they're doing new things there to keep it fresh?
This was, one of the things that I was worried about. We can kind of break down what we were worried about before the trip in a little bit here. But yeah, so it's interesting because they talk about like Jolie Menzel, who used to be at Telltale, and she's kind of the narrative designer here working with Matt and Trey. She was talking about like being on pins and needles watching season 19 because like, oh my God, they add Soda Sopa and like any little detail in the lore for South Park, they have to adapt and throw into the city. But they have rearranged things a little bit. They added like an extra row of houses, which doesn't seem like much, but it's something onto the map.
Yeah.
There's a big tower in the upper left that I don't know exactly what it is. So they remixed the town a little bit, but I still think it's going to feel very familiar because I mean they have to have the same town.
It has to be the same thing.
Yeah.
You're
They've
still going to
also-
have Kenny's house. You're still going to have Stan's house. Like,
And they've like tweaked some
They're-
rooms here and there.
Yeah.
Game changer, you can go in garages now. They have like depth.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just like the one little layer before.
Yeah,
deal.
and they've added like new rooms to familiar buildings, like maybe a door that you can access in the first game now leads to like a whole different section.
Or
of
the police station's a lot
yeah.
bigger this time around. And also something different is because it's like they're superheroes, they're going around at night
Okay.
quite a bit. So even though I think there were some night sections in the first one, the idea that it's going on and that
Yeah.
the town's getting darker over time is one of the interesting things that they talked about, like working with Matt and Trey, is one of the big rebounds they had to do was like, I think it was because like Trey is watching Gotham or like some darker stuff. And then the town just started getting darker and darker. And then eventually Matt and
They're
Trey
like,
realized like, this isn't South Park anymore.
yeah, it's not
like,
South Park. We got to go this way. And then
time
it would
to bounce
be,
it back, folks.
Then it would be too humorous, and they're like, "Well, now we still want to like do the superhero stuff. We're straying too far from that." So it was interesting, kind of like watching them like adjust when they were like finding that script.
By the way, Fractured takes place like what, a few days after Stick of Truth.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Which is funny. Then they're gonna play it up with some jokes and stuff. But like then you look at stuff that like Soda Sopa, like there's this whole new section of the town that has appeared like over the course of a couple of
There's
years.
been 2 episodes or 2 seasons of the show, and like the 3rd
Yeah.
season is airing now between the 2 games.
Yeah,
and that's
like a
all
lot.
in that couple days or a couple
technically-
minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
It's
since
supposed
the
to
end
have
of Stick of
happened
Truth.
all in those
Where do
2
these
days.
games slot into the timeline
Oh
of the show?
man, they don't.
Have they revealed
really.
that? No.
No.
Well, no, I mean it's up to date, but we asked him on the first cover story trip about that, and like even Matt and Trey are like, man, like it's South Park lore, like
Yeah,
it's
it's all
all pretty
fuzzy.
loose. Like we just put things where we need them, and so it's kind of taking that approach where roughly, it'll be current in theory with season 20, which they're airing now, but it's not like it is set in 18.5. It's not like a Walking Dead
Alternate universe. New 52.
Yeah.
Earth 2.
I mean,
right.
they're definitely because 20 is airing currently, right? 20.
Yep.
So like 18 and 19 characters are in there, like Classy and PC Principal and stuff. Like we saw them in cutscenes and stuff like that.
Right.
So
But talking about like just how fast and loose these things are coming in, it's really interesting to see Ubisoft San Francisco working on this and thinking about the fact that the whole coon concept and the superhero concept, is probably cooked up. We don't know, but in theory, in like that 6-day span when they're creating a new South Park episode, and now just like that haphazard lore of like, I don't know, what is Stan's character, Tool Shed?
Tool Shed,
Yeah, it's like Tool Shed over there. It's Stan, superheroes. You go now. Ubisoft San Francisco has to spend years like diving into this lore that was just a pure whim years and years ago for Matt and Trey.
And figuring out how those powers work.
Right,
Because
exactly.
you go back and watch those original like Coon and Friends episodes, and like everybody's got a crazy costume, and like Kyle's in a kite get up. You're
Human
like, what
kite,
kind
of
of
course.
powers does he have? But so yeah, and then like just that team rolled out like, how do these powers work, and like what are the benefits, and like, okay, Kyle's sort of like a healing class character,
yeah,
but
he can
also,
fly
like,
in and pull people back.
yeah,
you
since
know?
he's a kind of a kite, he can kind of like grab characters and pull them back, kind of like they were kites.
Yeah.
kind of kiting his friends, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. So I think we talked about it a little bit when Elise was on this podcast a while ago, because I knew this cover story was coming up, and I was playing through Stick of Truth again. And that's why I unloaded a whole volley of thoughts on her Gamescom session with South Park. But I was talking about how I really wasn't a fan of the Coon and Friends episodes when they first aired. I went back and watched them before this trip, and they're better than I remembered. I forgot it was connected to the whole BP oil spill.
Yeah, that was the best stuff though, which is like the
Right.
best stuff in those episodes was not the Coon and Friends stuff. I feel like.
sorry.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I think I really did not factor in how much they can pull from the rest of the South Park universe for this new game. There's still so much that they haven't even touched on. And they said that like, Captain Hindsight and Cthulhu are going to be briefly in this game, which were big parts of those episodes.
Right. But not the main thing at all.
No, it's not like Cartman can summon Cthulhu whenever he wants, as far as we know, which is how that trilogy
They
ended.
were a little cagey about Cthulhu. Yeah.
Yeah, but I forgot that like, they can bring in like Super Friends, like those old episodes, like anything in the South Park universe that kind of relates to superheroes they can draw upon, and there's plenty of stuff that's not related to superheroes at all that they're still pulling from.
Right. Were you worried because you're not as big of a fan of superhero stuff, and you just like the setting of
well-
Lord of the Rings better?
Yeah, I like the idea of the specific game parody aspect of Stick of Truth, the idea of like kind of taking Skyrim and making fun of it, making fun of that whole genre, whereas the idea of like, we're just gonna make fun of pop culture at large, and I guess superhero films, like it's less fun to me. Like I like games, commenting on games. I think it's a more interesting, like not taken path in the industry. But that really, I left the trip feeling much, much better about the breadth of this game and the different stuff they're touching on.
Yeah. I can't remember if they said an exact hour count, but they did say it would be a little bit longer. They said stories a little bit longer, and then like just gameplay wise, there's probably going to be a little bit more to do, so the game's going to be
Sweet.
longer than the first game was.
Yeah,
the first game was kind of short anyway.
It was, yeah. You could beat it in under 15 hours
It
pretty
felt-
easily.
It felt just right though for a South Park
They
experience.
definitely
I thought
mentioned it.
I thought they nailed that.
Yeah, they said north of 20 hours for this one. They also mentioned there's going to be DLC. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. But the most interesting thing about this trip for me is just how much they're bracing for a long-term relationship with Matt and Trey, it is just one of the most interesting stories in the industry for me, because I love South Park and I love, game production, and just seeing how they try and blend these two, and the idea of this studio bracing for a long-term relationship by using the same engine that made The Division, Snowdrop engine, which is just bizarre. But they use that engine so they can import the Maya assets, the animation assets, directly from South Park Studios. So they spent a year of hell, as they put it, trying to get Snowdrop up and running to make it work with South Park. As they put it, basically just going into the engine of the car and ripping out parts they didn't need anymore. Like,
turning off the online stuff. They had to like reprogram it so that you could pause the game because Division doesn't have a pause.
Right,
It's
so just silly
so
little
you're just
thing.
like, oh, that's such a weird thing to even think about.
Yeah, but the idea of just getting Ubisoft muscle and like all of Ubisoft just ready to go for the whims of Matt and Trey. Like, well, we're making this game. Let's hope it goes well so that we can keep making South Park games because Stick of Truth sold so well. Like, it's a profitable venture. But it's so bizarre to hinge all Ubisoft muscle onto, boy, Matt and Trey, the auteurs, amazing geniuses. But like, if they don't feel like making another game,
They're not going to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
What if they
So
get halfway through and they're like, you know what, we were wrong. We just don't want to do this.
yeah, who the hell knows? And so how do you like put those two systems together? It's insane to me.
It was just interesting too because it was at E3 that they got up on stage and they're like, yeah, well, you know, coming out later this year. At the time they were thinking, and so I guess we should probably write this game. It's just like jokes like that where you're like, wait a minute, what?
Meanwhile, Ubisoft CEOs are like panicking and like
They're
looking
laughing
around.
with tears.
Yeah.
Right. Like, you know, it's a complicated relationship to get into, but it's fun to see Ubisoft, in theory, bracing for the long term so that whenever Matt and Trey want to make a game, they can come back home to the Rocksmith studio and they'll be ready to go. Fascinating to hear their perspective on working with Matt and Trey. Like, Jason, the producer, had a good line where he's talking about, like, every once in a while, Trey would call up and then he would just open his line or his dialogue with, how much would you guys be bummed out if? And then the entire team's just like, oh no, just like
What's
racing.
coming? What's coming?
Right. If we just kind of scrap that area.
To their credit, though, they also said that like Matt and Trey both have this like pretty good like design sense or natural
they learned a lot on Stick of
idea
Truth.
of like like what's going to work in a game and what's not, and like they'll have things that they walk away from a meeting, like Jason said, that they'll come back a week later and he's like, I got to tell these guys that it's not working, and they'll jump on the phone and Matt's like, so this isn't going to work, we realized, and like it's like, oh, they get it before we
Beat
even
him
have
to
to
the
tell
punch.
them, and so that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to see how this cover story was treated compared to Stick of Truth. Because over 5 years ago, or whenever the hell that was, I went to Obsidian, and it was a completely different publisher, different studio, different GI team. It was Dan and Brian I went with. And so I feel like this
Rest their
weird holdover from that previous era. And it's funny to like compare the talking points of the different studios, because Obsidian was very much like all that other South Park stuff, all the other games, not real South Park stuff. Matt and Trey are with us every step of the way, every creative decision. And now with this meeting, it's like, look, Stick of Truth is great, but Matt and Trey could have been more involved this time. Matt and Trey are in every creative decision. It's like, okay, that was the exact talking point from last time.
Even the animators were like, it looks even more like the show than last time. And you're like, man, if you ask the average guy on the street, they're like, that looked exactly like Stick of Truth looked exactly like an episode. So it's like, there's maybe like minute upgrades that most people aren't going to notice. But I mean, the game still looked great. One thing I will notice just on that front is like load times are way, way quicker. Just like, because the way they built it in the Division. I don't know if you remember Stick of Truth, you would walk into a house and it would take a while to load up.
For sure. Even going to combat, like on consoles, it was like, hey, lightning bolts for a long time before it finally boots into the actual
So that's kind
combat
of
scene.
nice. It's one of those things that, like, looking back, I don't really remember the load times, but they were annoying.
But on that animation front, one of the more interesting little stories to come out of the studio, and Reiner, tell us when we're talking about South Park too much.
No, I was just reflecting in my mind on the month of hell I had setting up that first cover.
Oh, sure.
Andy was out of the office. He was down and out at the hospital for a month. Yeah, he had surgery. Gave his brother his kidney. You know,
Man, that was around
one of his
then, huh?
kidneys.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I was setting up this whole cover. Found it. I think I still have the prototype footage of the game on my computer, which no one's ever seen.
But instead of the word douchebag, you were called something else very defensive in that early take on Stick of Truth.
That wasn't me. That was Dan Reichert.
No.
In
the game.
Like Cartman. What Cartman
Oh,
says
yes.
to you.
Right.
Yeah.
Imagine if they
boy.
stuck with that.
I won't go too much into it. There's a lot of story I don't want to tell, but at one point, our cover art in me setting this up was a naked Cartman on the front of the cover, fully naked Cartman, and then the back of the cover was like cut out outfits for him that you could
Which is a really great idea.
That's
I
a
loved
really
it
good
so
I think we
much.
still have that art somewhere too, but like there was a bunch of different covers that didn't work, and it was like chaos getting that cover together. Even on Matt and Trey's end,
Professor
they
Chaos.
were on, they were off, they were on, they were off. Like
Yeah.
you guys were flying out, then seconds later, the flight was canceled. Then you were flying out again.
Yeah, that took a lot of THQ strong arm to make that happen.
Yeah,
back
THQ,
then,
Danny Bilson drove to South Park Studios to talk to them in person. And
It's like, this game is going to save our company.
and then the game turned out great.
The game
was not
turned out great.
Long story short,
Not for them.
the game was great. They knocked it out of the park. They're geniuses, and can't wait to play this one.
Yeah, but the animator, little side story at the studio is one of the lead animators on the game worked on the show for like 6 years. And now he went over to Ubisoft to help out. And he gave some really fascinating examples, if you're an animation nerd, about like South Park animation done right and South Park animation done wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Where he just would show like these comparing clips, A and B. And it's like you look at one and say, yeah, that looks fine. That looks like animated South Park. Then you see like, and this is in the very specific South Park style. And it's like, oh yeah, okay, now it's night and day. I see exactly
like once you see it, you're like, yep, that's definitely South Park animation.
And a lot of
like a little bit cruder, kind of like
a little bit stiffer,
stop motiony,
right? Yeah, but then just talking about like Matt and Trey, they just know this style inside and out. They have very tiny requests, which is totally fair. It's their baby.
Yeah.
About like characters, their necks cannot be bent this much. You need to do it in this certain way. But like when you develop the look of that show, it's so hard to convert it into games, and they seem to be doing it again. And it's great.
It
to
is
see.
like talking to that animator. It became apparent very quickly that it is deceptively simple. Like you think that's just like 2D. Just make like a 2D game, but it's like, oh, there's a lot more happening here than I ever realized. You know,
even just to get technical for a little bit, even just like the background art, where it's like, oh, it's all just painted on. What's the big deal? But no, every object, because it is literally rendered in the computer as if it is cardboard cutouts, like the actual show. And so like every different color you see, like say there's like a coffee mug, and and like if you do a drawing of it, there'll be like the circle part on the top that's a slightly different color, showing like the inside of the coffee cup. That is a different layer. And so in the computer, that's rendered as a different layer. And so like if you rotate the camera, it is
just like pieces of paper layered on top.
It's just infinite. It is mind-boggling.
Which just means there's so much to load up.
Right.
And like why animate it in a game is actually way harder than you would think it would be.
Yeah, for sure. And they have, again, like Ubisoft Muscle, there's like, I think they said the team is 3 times as big as Styx, roughly. They have 140 people working on it. Ubisoft Osaka is working on it, which is interesting because they're the studio that made the Gravity Falls 3DS game, which was also cel-shaded. So they have a little expertise in that arena.
You guys know what you're doing. Okay, bye.
Yeah, work on it, Japan. Yeah, I am fascinated by the production of this game. Where do you guys stand on combat?
I was wondering we were going to get to that because I was like, I think we walked out of the meeting and we were like, the one sticking point is, first up, it doesn't look bad. I don't know. I'm curious what you guys think. But going back to Stick, like, I don't know, that combat worked for me. I kind of liked that simple, like, turn-based attack button thing. Now, I like XCOM style combat where you have a grid and you move around things, and it seems like they're kind of going for that a little bit, kind of more of a strategy type thing
Or
where you
Final
move
Fantasy
around a grid.
Tactics.
Yeah, a little bit, like a simplified grid. So it's not quite as complex, but there is cover. There are like elements that you can push enemies into and do extra damage, stuff like that. And your characters move around the field, and all their attacks have a different shape, so you might be able to hit different characters on a spread or like maybe a cross shaped out from the character. So it's interesting, like depth of strategy. I'm just like a little nervous. Is that all going to come together as much as I want it to and be as fun as something like a deep strategy game like XCOM? And I'm worried it might not.
You're not learning new moves. You're just mixing and matching from different classes, which I guess is effectively the same, but might feel a little bit like there's less progression maybe from Stick of Truth. But what I worry about is it's such a weird dichotomy for the studio, because a big talking point was we want to make this game for South Park fans, not just RPG fans. Like, you don't need to be an RPG expert to play this game. Like, if you like South Park the show, you should be able to play this game.
That's the right call, in my opinion.
Yeah, but they said they had plenty of anecdotes of people who were big South Park fans would try and play Stick of Truth and be like, what is a timing-based combat? Like, what are all these systems, status effects? What is this nonsense? So on one hand, they're saying they're trying to streamline it and simplify the game. Then the other hand, I think because Matt and Trey are fans of like board games, specifically Trey, like the combat is more tactics-based, which I would consider to be more of a turnoff for casual people. But the argument on the other side of that is, well, no, because you're fighting in the actual places and you can actually move around the combat space, so it's more intuitive. You don't have to be an RPG nut to appreciate what you can do.
There still is that timing button press, though, if like you hit the button at the right time, you do extra damage. So it's like, It's not like it's more simplified in that sense.
They kind of said they were trying to find a middle ground between Trey and Matt, because Trey's like a board game guy, likes tactics games, loves getting into strategy, and then Matt's more of like the action shooter guy. So like they kind of described it as like they were working on these things with the two guys, and Trey was kind of pushing like, oh, more strategy, and then Matt would kind of be like, oh well, but I can still have like my action moments, right? And I don't know, we'll see if it does ultimately find that middle ground. Like I'm a little turned off from it, but I also don't really enjoy tactics just in general.
It's interesting
I'm with you.
that the superhero game, which you would think in concept would call for more of an action focus, is actually going more RPG,
Well,
slower, turn-based,
but in
grid-based.
theory, because you can walk around, it is slightly more action focused than just Paper Mario style standing still.
Yeah, you're not like selecting, okay, let's move 2 spots. You're actively walking over there, which is kind of cool. Like in that, ideally, it could make the combat feel like it's moving more consistently, but it's still RPG.
And moving those characters in South Park games just feels so satisfying.
It's always
watching
funny.
them waddle
The little
over
bounce.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 frames down, 2 frames up. But I'm not worried about it when it comes to like set piece comedy, big like boss battles and stuff like that. But where
Oh,
I just
God.
worry about it is like getting into random combat around town. You know, where the equivalent of like the Nazi zombies and Stick of Truth. It's like, oh, I just gotta take out these folks or take out these elves for a while. Like having to go into those battles again and again. It's like, okay, back to this tactics map so I can shoehorn my way through it. Like I think they can do set piece combat really well with this format, but I just worry like, okay, this is gonna take longer naturally because it's tactics.
The random battles, yeah, we got into a random battle during our playthrough, and it was like, this is kind of taking a long time for just a random battle. So-
it's a tough pacing
and
issue, and I hope they can
said
nail it. 5
to 10 minutes, I think, the average battle
Wow,
would be,
that's
which is
significant.
a little bit longer than most RPGs, I
Yeah.
think. So I don't know. That turned me off a little bit too, because as much as I like games like XCOM, like you sit down for a game of XCOM and you know what you're getting into. But if you're going into a RPG and it's full of random battles, you don't want that big long battle each time.
Right. So outside of combat, though, I was really impressed by everything I saw in the game. I think it all looks really good. Like they're
it's gonna be awesome.
Yeah,
I
they're
can't
bringing
wait.
back mini
Can't wait.
games. Like we saw one where like you're working with Scott Malkinson, who's the kid who has diabetes on the show. He's only been in a couple episodes. I noticed in this season they tease that they might be building up more of a
They're
storyline.
sort
though.
of using him more, I think, on purpose.
Maybe because of the game.
Yeah,
Who
it seems like you
knows?
spend a lot of time with him, at least early in the game.
Right,
Yeah.
right. He's Professor Diabetes?
Captain Diabetes.
Captain Diabetes, of course.
Power is he can spike his blood sugar and he becomes super strong. It's
Basically
kinda like
the Hulk.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he has diabetes because as his mom was giving birth to him, she farted on his face.
That's right.
That's the lore that they went with. Yeah, it is. Oh, anyways. Oh, so the mini game is you go into the strip club with Scott,
That's right.
and they're like trying to get information out of these guys because they're trying to figure out who has a connection to Netflix. It's a long story. Anyways, and so trying to get information out of these guys, so they're like acting as if they're strippers, and it's just like businessmen
right.
in the back, and there's like a mini game to do a lap dance like on these businessmen's face.
That was actually going to be, you talked about what's your funniest moment from the game. That
Yeah.
was going to be mine, but it's kind of hard to convey because a lot of that humor is visual.
Yeah.
It's like just watching these two kids lap dance on
this
these like,
diabetic
kids'
child.
laps.
And I
Like,
love, like, they said, like, hey, you can see our music game roots coming through here through this mini game of giving a lap dance to a businessman. But also, I mean, they've been teasing a lot. There's going to be the Kanye West Gay
Yeah.
Fish
Right.
mini
Well,
game.
It's the unknown things that they won't tell us
Right.
before. Like the unknown qualities that were in Stick of Truth. Like, oh my God, I
Yeah.
can't believe
Yeah.
that got through.
Yeah.
I can't believe, but even like something that's not that offensive, but just so awesome, like the Canada sequence.
Yeah.
And they mentioned
Things like that are awesome.
Yeah. And they mentioned there's going to be art style shifts in this game, not Canada again.
right.
I want to retread that ground, but something in that
There
vein.
could be a big tease like that, which they were kind of vague on what that is, which I honestly didn't even want to know because
Right.
Yeah, yeah, I don't.
Canada was such a cool surprise in the last game.
It's so good. Something really bizarre is, and I just know this because I was on that last cover story trip for Stick of Truth, but they showed concept art. It's even in the magazine for Stick of Truth of like a Christmas Town world and going underground with the crab people.
Yeah.
And now this time around, they're saying, by the way, and this one ended up in Stick of Truth at all. And now this time around, they're like, yeah, there's Christmas Town in this game, and crab people are a faction. Unclear if it's
Yeah.
like you go to their world, but it's interesting that like those remnants that didn't quite make it into Stick of Truth are still carrying forward, even with a completely different
Even though
studio.
it's a different studio. Which is
But
kinda
apparently
interesting.
something in that Christmas town is such a good idea that they're going to bring it back around this time. So
Maybe they won't now that the game's delayed.
yeah, who knows?
Out of December, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
Early
next
next
year.
year.
Yeah, partly factored in because of season 20 was building up, ramping into production, and also they just say like, we want time to polish this baby.
That's great.
'Cause as they put
Polish
it,
it up.
yeah, they say they're feeling confident it's going to be the funniest game ever made. It stands a real shot. I'm excited to see their sophomore effort.
And its competition is the game before.
Exactly.
That's right.
Which is so good.